I'm Autumn Miller, 34, and I froze in the doorway of my childhood home, luggage still in hand. This year's only for real family, my brother Jeffrey said coldly, champagne glass gripped tight. The room fell silent. His wife Madison smirked beside him, hand protectively over her stomach. 5 years building my career in Chicago, and suddenly I was an outsider. Memories flashed of Jeffrey and me building forts, sharing secrets, defending each other. Now his eyes held nothing but ice. The worst part? My father, my champion, my rock looked away in shame. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt that gut punch moment when someone you love suddenly treats you like a stranger. Trust me, what happens next will show you exactly why blood isn't always thicker than water. The drive from Chicago to Westfield, Connecticut had been long but energizing. After 5 years of climbing the corporate ladder at Barrett Marketing Group, I'd finally secured the associate director position I'd been working toward. The emergency campaign launch that kept me from coming home for Christmas had been worth it. The client was thrilled, my boss Emma was impressed, and my career was soaring. I decided to surprise my family for New Year's, packing my car with expensive gifts to make up for missing Christmas. A Mont Blanc pen for Dad, a cashmere sweater for Mom, vintage fishing lures for Jeffrey, and designer perfume for my younger sister Haley. The 2-story colonial where I grew up looked exactly as it always had during the holidays, white lights outlining the roof, the handmade wreath on the front door, and the snowman flag my mother had displayed every winter since I was a child. The familiarity made Jeffrey's cold greeting all the more jarring. After the initial shock of Jeffrey's words, my mother Martha rushed over, her hug slightly stiff but warming as she held on. "Autumn, we didn't know you were coming," she said, tucking a strand of graying hair behind her ear. The lines around her eyes had deepened since I'd last seen her. My father Robert approached more slowly, a slight limp in his gait that I didn't remember. "Good to see you, kiddo," he said, his hug brief. Something was off in his usual bear-like embrace. "Sorry for not calling ahead. I wanted it to be a surprise," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I brought gifts to make up for missing Christmas." "How thoughtful," Madison said, her voice dripping with insincerity. "But you know what they say about presents, not making up for presents." I'd only met Madison twice before, once briefly when they started dating, and then at their wedding 8 months ago. She was objectively beautiful with her perfectly highlighted blonde hair and expensive clothing, but something in her eyes had always seemed calculating to me. "Madison's right, but we're glad you're here now," my mother said quickly. Always the peacekeeper. Haley, my 29-year-old sister who still lived in town, gave me a genuine smile and a warm hug. "I'm really happy you came," she whispered. Her support felt like the only authentic welcome. As everyone moved back to the living room, I noticed the changes immediately. Family photos that had always featured all 4 of us, Mom, Dad, Jeffrey, and me, had been replaced with new ones featuring Madison. Even the giant family portrait above the fireplace had been swapped for a wedding photo of Jeffrey and Madison. "We have exciting news," my mother gushed as we sat down. "Madison and Jeffrey are expecting. 3 months along now." The announcement explained the protective hand gesture and the new family dynamics. Madison was carrying the first grandchild, elevating her status significantly. "That's wonderful," I said automatically. "Congratulations to both of you." Madison dominated the conversation for the next hour, discussing her pregnancy symptoms in detail and explaining how they were converting my old bedroom into a nursery information delivered with just enough sweetness to mask the message, "You don't belong here anymore." While Madison talked, I observed how Jeffrey had changed. My once jovial brother, who used to make jokes at every family gathering, sat quietly, nodding along with Madison's every word. My parents were similarly deferential, especially my father, whose opinions had always been the cornerstone of family decisions. When Madison left to use the bathroom, I took the opportunity to speak to Jeffrey privately. "What did you mean by real family?" I asked directly. Jeffrey's jaw tightened. "You know exactly what I meant. You abandoned us for your precious career. Family comes first, Autumn. That's something you never understood." "I didn't abandon anyone. I call every week. I send gifts. I visit when I can." "When you can," he repeated mockingly. "When it fits your schedule. Dad had a heart attack last year. Did you know that? Where were you? I felt like I'd been slapped. What? No one told me about any heart attack. Why would we? You made it clear where your priorities lie. Before I could respond, Madison returned, placing a proprietary hand on Jeffrey's shoulder. Everything okay here? You look upset, honey, she said to Jeffrey, though her eyes were on me, feigning concern while clearly enjoying the tension. I remembered fishing trips with Dad and Jeffrey, summers spent catching bass at Lake Henderson, Jeffrey teaching me to bait a hook, Dad showing us how to clean the fish. The memory felt distant now, disconnected from the cold strangers my family had become. New Year's Eve dinner had always followed certain traditions in our house. Mom would make her famous beef Wellington. I would prepare the appetizers, and Dad would select the wines. This year, everything had changed. Madison had apparently taken over the kitchen, replacing our traditional meal with what she called a more refined menu of poached salmon and quinoa. Mom hovered at the periphery, occasionally offering suggestions that Madison smoothly ignored. We needed to update the menu, Madison explained when she caught me looking at the unfamiliar dishes. Something more appropriate for entertaining and healthier for the baby. Your mother's recipes are a bit dated. I bit my tongue and offered to help, but was quickly assigned the task of setting the table far from the actual cooking. While arranging silverware, I overheard Haley talking to our cousin who had arrived for dinner. No, Autumn deliberately missed Christmas, she was saying. Madison showed us the text where she said she couldn't be bothered with family obligations. That's why everyone's a bit weird around her. I nearly dropped the stack of plates I was holding. I had never sent any such texts. The emergency at work had been real, our biggest client threatening to walk unless we delivered a completely revamped campaign before December 26th. Later, while fetching more napkins from the dining room sideboard, I overheard Madison and Jeffrey talking in the adjacent study. She's obviously jealous of our happiness, Madison was saying. And the baby news probably kills her. You know how career women get when they realize they've sacrificed family for work? I know, Jeffrey agreed. I just don't understand how she changed so much. Their voices faded as they moved deeper into the study. But the damage was done. Madison was actively turning my brother against me, creating a narrative that painted me as the villain. During a brief moment alone with Haley while bringing dishes to the dining room, I confronted her. What texts were you talking about earlier? I never sent anything saying I couldn't be bothered with Christmas. Haley looked uncomfortable. Madison found your old diary in the attic and showed everyone entries where you complained about hometown life. Then she showed us texts from your number. She hesitated. There was also stuff about how embarrassed you were by Dad's job and the family business. I was speechless. My teenage diary? I had indeed written typical adolescent complaints, but that was 15 years ago, and the texts were clearly fabricated. Haley, you know that's not how I feel. And any texts she showed you were fake. I kind of figured, Haley admitted, but Madison is very convincing. And with the baby coming, everyone's been careful not to upset her. At dinner, the isolation continued. Inside jokes were shared that deliberately excluded me. References to events I'd missed were emphasized. When it came time for the traditional family toast, Jeffrey raised his glass to those who make family their priority. The moment that broke me came when Madison, reaching across the table for the salt, accidentally spilled her red wine all over my cream-colored silk blouse, a $300 investment piece I'd bought to celebrate my promotion. Oh my goodness, I'm so clumsy these days. Pregnancy brain, she exclaimed with exaggerated distress that didn't reach her eyes. The spill was clearly deliberate. Her hand had been nowhere near her wine glass until the moment it tipped in my direction. What hurt more than the ruined blouse was Jeffrey immediately jumping to her defense. It was an accident, Autumn. Don't make a big deal about it, he snapped when I couldn't completely hide my reaction. I excused myself to the bathroom, where I finally let the tears fall. I sat on the closed toilet lid, my body shaking with silent sobs. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel, my best friend in Chicago. How's the family reunion going? I couldn't bring myself to respond truthfully. Instead, I splashed water on my face, applied concealer to my reddened eyes, and resolved not to give Madison the satisfaction of driving me away. Not until I figured out exactly what had happened to turn my loving family against me. The morning after New Year's Eve was awkward. I came down to breakfast to find everyone already seated, conversations halting abruptly at my appearance. The undercurrents of tension were palpable as I poured myself coffee from the carafe. "Sleep well?" my mother asked with forced cheerfulness. "Well enough?" I replied, taking a seat beside Haley, who gave me a small, sympathetic smile. Madison and Jeffrey were huddled at the far end of the table, whispering intently over what appeared to be financial documents. When they noticed me looking, Jeffrey quickly gathered the papers. "Business matters," he said curtly. "Nothing that concerns you." "Actually," I ventured, "how is the store doing? I noticed the downtown area has some new development since I was last here." An uncomfortable silence fell. Miller's Hardware had been in our family for 3 generations. My grandfather started it, my father expanded it, and Jeffrey had taken over day-to-day operations when Dad semi-retired. "We're managing," my father said vaguely, exchanging glances with my brother. "More than managing," Madison interjected brightly. "We have exciting plans for expansion. My father's investment group has been extremely helpful with financing." Something in her tone made my marketing instincts tingle. After breakfast, I walked downtown to see the store for myself. The hardware store looked much the same from the outside, though I noticed the inventory seemed sparser than I remembered. What caught my attention were the for sale signs on neighboring businesses and a large billboard announcing "Future Home of Riverside Plaza. Luxury shopping coming soon" on the vacant lot across the street. Inside the store, I found Thomas Grayson, who had worked for my father since before I was born. His weathered face broke into a genuine smile when he saw me. "Autumn Miller. Now there's a sight for sore eyes," he said, giving me a warm hug. "Good to see you too, Thomas. How are things really going here?" "Everyone at home is being weirdly evasive." Thomas's expression turned serious. "Not great, if I'm honest. Your father's health scare hit him hard, and Jeffrey," he hesitated. "Jeffrey means well, but he doesn't have your father's head for business. Inventory management, supplier relationships, these things take experience." "What health scare?" "Jeffrey mentioned something about a heart attack. Mild one, about 10 months back. Doctor said it was stress-related. Your father stepped back after that, and Jeffrey took over completely." I felt sick. No one had called to tell me my father had a heart attack. Not my mother, not Jeffrey, not even Haley. "And now Madison's family is involved?" Thomas nodded, lowering his voice. "Madison's father, Harold Pierce, heads Pierce Development Group. They provided a loan when the store started struggling. Terms didn't seem great to me, but Jeffrey was insistent, and your father was too weak to argue much." A customer approached, ending our conversation, but Thomas slipped me his phone number. "Call me if you want to talk more. Some things shouldn't be discussed in the open." Back at home, I found myself alone in my father's study. The temptation was too great. I began carefully looking through his desk drawers until I found a folder labeled Pierce Financing. The terms were worse than I imagined. The loan used the building and land as collateral, with an interest rate well above market. A clause allowed for property acquisition in lieu of repayment under certain conditions. Conditions the store was likely to meet given the current trajectory. I was so absorbed in the documents that I didn't hear Jeffrey enter. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he demanded, snatching the papers from my hands. "Trying to understand why you'd agree to these predatory terms." I shot back. "This isn't a loan, Jeffrey. It's a thinly veiled property grab. Pierce Development wants this location for their Riverside Plaza project." "You have no idea what you're talking about," Jeffrey said, though I could see doubt flicker in his eyes. "Madison's family is helping us through a rough patch. Something you wouldn't understand since you've been too busy climbing the corporate ladder to notice our family struggling. I would have helped if anyone had told me. Why didn't anyone call me when Dad had a heart attack?" "Because you made it clear your career comes first. Madison was here for us. She saw an opportunity to join our families in a way that benefits everyone." "Benefits everyone? Or benefits her family's development company?" Jeffrey's face flushed with anger. "This is exactly why we didn't tell you. You've always been jealous of anyone else getting attention. Now you're trying to ruin my marriage because you can't stand that I'm happy and successful without your input. Our shouting match drew the rest of the family. Madison arrived first, immediately going to Jeffrey's side with a concerned expression. "What's happening?" "Jeffrey, your blood pressure," she said, casting an accusatory glance my way. "I found her snooping through Dad's private financial papers," Jeffrey explained as our parents entered the study. "I wasn't snooping. I was trying to understand what's happened to our family and the business while I've been away." Madison's performance was masterful. "I understand you're feeling left out, Autumn, but trying to create problems between Jeffrey and me won't bring you closer to the family. We all want you to be part of this, but you have to respect boundaries." She sounded so reasonable that I almost doubted myself. Even my father seemed to accept her version of events. "Your brother and Madison are handling things," he said tiredly. "The business is family matters." "I am family," I insisted, feeling increasingly desperate. "Family shows up," Jeffrey said flatly. Later that evening, I discovered Madison had been busy on social media, posting about toxic people who try to sabotage happy families out of jealousy. While she hadn't named me directly, the timing made it clear who she meant. Comments from extended family and hometown friends showed the narrative was working. I was being painted as the jealous, career-obsessed sister trying to undermine my brother's marriage. I felt like I was being systematically erased from my own family history, replaced by a version of events I didn't recognize. The next morning, I entered the kitchen to find my mother organizing jewelry in a small wooden box pieces I recognized instantly as family heirlooms. There was my grandmother's pearl necklace, Great Aunt Susan's emerald earrings, and a diamond bracelet that had been in the Miller family for 4 generations. "Morning, Mom. What's with Grandma's jewelry?" I asked casually, pouring myself coffee. "Just organizing some things for Madison," she replied without looking up. "For the baby shower next month." I nearly choked on my coffee. The baby shower? But those pieces were supposed to be divided between Haley and me. Mom finally looked up, her expression uncomfortable. "Well, circumstances change. Madison is carrying the next generation of Millers. And honestly, Autumn, with your salary in Chicago, you can buy whatever jewelry you want. Madison appreciates family history more." The unfairness stung like a physical blow. These weren't just valuable pieces, they were our heritage, connections to women in our family I'd never had the chance to meet. "That's not the point, Mom. You always said those would come to your daughters. That diamond bracelet was specifically promised to me for my 30th birthday, remember?" "I remember you couldn't come home for your 30th because of some work event," my mother replied with uncharacteristic sharpness. "Madison is here, building a family with your brother. These pieces should go to someone who values family presence, not just family history." Before I could respond, Madison entered, her timing impeccable, as always. "Those look beautiful, Martha," she gushed, peering into the box. "My mother never had heirlooms like these to pass down. It means so much that you consider me worthy of them." The conversation was effectively ended. I retreated to the living room, fighting back tears of frustration and betrayal. That evening, we had dinner with Madison's parents, Harold and Catherine Pierce. Harold was a large man with an imposing presence and an expensive watch that he checked frequently throughout the meal. Catherine was slim, polished, and mostly silent, deferring to her husband on every topic. During dinner, I learned that Pierce Development had been helping with my father's medical bills. "Only natural to support family," Harold boomed, "especially when that family will soon be joined by my first grandchild." The way he emphasized first made it clear that this grandchild was particularly special because it was the first a point of pride and possession. "We're so grateful," my mother said, looking at Harold with something close to reverence. I observed my father during this exchange. He seemed diminished somehow, pushing food around his plate rather than eating. When Harold made a comment about old businesses needing to make way for progress, my father didn't even react. The Robert Miller I knew would never have let such a remark pass unchallenged. After dessert, Jeffrey made an announcement that sent ice through my veins. "Given Dad's health concerns and the expanding business needs, we've decided that Madison will be taking over the family finances," he stated. "Her experience with her father's companies gives her the perfect background." "That seems unnecessary," I said carefully. "I have an MBA and work with corporate finances regularly. I'd be happy to help if needed." Madison laughed lightly. "Oh, Autumn, Corporate marketing budgets are hardly the same as family business operations. Besides, she added with a sly glance at her father, we need someone who's actually here and invested in the family's future. What my daughter means, Harold interjected, is that continuity is important. Madison and Jeffrey are building their lives here. No offense, but your situation in Chicago seems rather unstable. My situation? I'm an associate director at one of the top marketing firms in the Midwest. Harold and Madison exchanged knowing looks. Of course you are, dear, Madison said condescendingly. After dinner, Haley pulled me aside, her expression troubled. Madison was using your laptop yesterday, she whispered. She said you told her she could check her email, but I saw her looking through your files and downloading something. Alarmed, I immediately went to check my computer. At first glance, nothing seemed amiss. Then I noticed a folder on the desktop that hadn't been there before, labeled Personal Photos. Inside were several embarrassing pictures, me clearly intoxicated at what appeared to be office parties, in compromising positions with an unidentifiable man. The photos were obvious fakes my head photoshopped onto someone else's body, but convincing enough at first glance. I realized with horror what Madison had planned. Sure enough, later that evening, Jeffrey confronted me in front of everyone, my laptop in his hands. Want to explain these? He demanded, turning the screen to show the doctored photos. No wonder you're so defensive about your Chicago life. Exactly what kind of marketing do you do there? Those are fake, I said immediately. Madison put them there. Haley saw her using my laptop yesterday. All eyes turned to Haley, who wilted under the pressure. I did see her using Autumn's computer, but I don't know what she was doing. I was checking my email because my phone was charging, Madison said smoothly. I never opened any files. Autumn, I understand you're upset about feeling replaced in the family, but this accusation is beyond hurtful. Her eyes welled with tears right on cue. I've tried so hard to welcome you, despite your obvious resentment of me, to suggest I'd do something so underhanded. She trailed off, leaning into Jeffrey for support. My brother's face hardened. You need to apologize to Madison right now, or you need to leave. I will not apologize for something I didn't do, I said firmly, though my voice shook slightly. Those photos are fake, and I think we all know who had the motive and opportunity to plant them. That's it, Jeffrey snapped. Pack your things. You're not welcome here anymore. My parents stood by silently, unwilling to intervene. Only Haley looked conflicted, but her support remained passive at best. Upstairs, packing my childhood belongings with shaking hands, I heard my father's voice from the hallway. Maybe it's better if she just goes back to Chicago, Martha. She clearly doesn't fit into our lives anymore. Those words, from the man who had once been my greatest champion, broke something inside me. I finished packing in a numb haze and called a rideshare to take me to the nearest hotel. The Westfield Inn was a far cry from my Chicago apartment, but it provided the solitude I desperately needed. Sitting on the edge of the bed, surrounded by hastily packed bags, I finally let myself fall apart completely. The sobs racked my body until my throat was raw and my eyes swollen. When the storm of emotion passed, I did what I always did in crisis mode. I made a plan. First, I called my boss Emma. I need to extend my leave, I explained after giving her an abbreviated version of events. Family emergency. Take the time you need, Emma said. Your team can handle the Bellworth account. Just keep me updated. Next, I opened my laptop and began researching Pierce Development Group. Their website boasted of revitalizing small-town America through strategic development, but digging deeper revealed a pattern of predatory practices. They would target struggling family businesses in prime locations, offer seemingly generous financial assistance, then leverage the inevitable default to acquire properties below market value. The luxury developments that followed typically drove out remaining small businesses through increased rents and property taxes. A pattern emerged across 3 different small towns in New England where Pierce Development had operated. Each followed the same trajectory: financial assistance, family discord, acquisition, and transformation that erased generations of community history. The next morning, I reached out to Lauren Collins, a high school friend who now worked at Westfield Community Bank. We met for coffee at a cafe far from the downtown area to avoid prying eyes. The Pierces aren't nearly as wealthy or connected as they pretend to be, Lauren confided after hearing my story. Harold leverages one property acquisition to finance the next. If a project fails, he's potentially insolvent. That's why he's so aggressive about ensuring properties fall into his hands he can't afford to lose. What about Madison's background? Jeffrey met her on a business trip to Boston. Lauren's expression turned knowing. Madison Pierce has played this role before. She was briefly engaged to the son of a hardware supply company in Vermont 3 years ago. The pattern sounds identical right down to the family jewelry. When the family business was finally signed over, the engagement mysteriously ended. The betrayals kept mounting. That afternoon, I drove to my childhood friend Megan's house to see if she had any insights, only to discover that Jeffrey had been telling everyone I'd abandoned the family when my father got sick. He said you refused to come home even after your dad's heart attack, Megan said uncomfortably. That you said your career was more important. That's absolutely false, I said, showing her my phone's call history. I call home weekly. No one ever told me about any heart attack. In fact, when Dad had his health scare last year, I offered to move home temporarily to help with the store. Jeffrey insisted he had it handled and that another person would just complicate things. Megan looked confused. That's not what he's been telling people. Madison's been very vocal about how you've neglected your family while building your big city career. The next betrayal came when I decided to retrieve some personal items from the garage that I hadn't been able to pack in my hasty exit. Arriving mid-morning when I knew everyone would be out, I used my old key to access the garage. There, in the far corner behind some old paint cans, I found boxes of family photos and mementos, my high school awards, childhood artwork, photos of fishing trips with Dad discarded like trash. Madison was systematically erasing me from the family narrative. Among the discarded memories, I found the old tackle box my father and I had used on our fishing trips. Inside was the lucky lure he had given me on my 12th birthday, a hand-carved wooden base that he'd made himself. Holding it, I remembered his words, "Sometimes, Autumn, the fish don't bite right away. Patience and persistence win the day." I pocketed the lure as my mother's car pulled into the driveway. I expected anger at finding me there, but instead, she seemed furtive, glancing back at the road as if afraid of being seen. "You shouldn't be here," she said, but there was no force behind the words. "I just came for some personal items," I explained, gesturing to the boxes of discarded memories. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know Jeffrey put those out here. I would have stopped him." "Would you, Mom? You've let Madison take over everything else, the house, the business, the family jewelry. Have you even questioned why Dad's being pushed out of decisions about the store he built?" "It's complicated," she whispered. "Your father's health is worse than anyone knows. He's refused better treatment because of the cost. Madison's family helping with medical bills has been a lifeline. At what price, though? Have you seen the loan terms? They're designed to force default. Pierce Development wants the property, not a successful family business." Doubt flickered in my mother's eyes. "Madison says her father just wants to help modernize the store." "Mom, I found out Madison's planning to sell the house after the baby comes. Did you know that?" She told her friend Tiffany it's too old-fashioned and not in a desirable enough area for their future. The color drained from my mother's face. She wouldn't. This home has been in the family for 4 generations. Just like the store. Just like the jewelry you're giving her. Our conversation was cut short by a text message alert on my mother's phone. She checked it, her expression shifting to panic. "It's Madison. They're coming back early. You need to go." As I gathered the box of personal items, my mother touched my arm briefly. "Be careful, Autumn. Madison can be vindictive when challenged." That warning, combined with everything else I'd learned, cemented my decision. This wasn't a battle I could win by retreating to Chicago. The only way to save my family was to stay and fight even if they currently saw me as the enemy. I rented a small 1-bedroom apartment in town the next day, using my savings to pay 6 months up front. Then I called Emma again. "I need to work remotely indefinitely," I explained. "Family situation has gotten more complicated." Emma was understanding but firm. "You can have 3 months, Autumn. After that, we need you back in the office or we'll have to discuss alternatives." With a timeline established, I began implementing my plan. First, I reached out to several local businesses to offer free marketing consultations. My credentials opened doors, and soon I was helping the bookstore increase foot traffic and assisting the local cafe with social media strategies. These connections provided both community goodwill and valuable local intelligence. Through these new business relationships, I was introduced to Simon Blackwell, a commercial property developer who had been trying to create a historical preservation and renewal project that directly competed with Pierce Development's Riverside Plaza concept. Unlike Pierce's model of replacing existing businesses, Blackwell's approach focused on modernizing while maintaining the town's character and existing business owners. Harold Pierce has blocked me at every turn, Simon explained during our lunch meeting. He's got the mayor's ear and has convinced the town council that his luxury concept will bring more tax revenue. What if you had evidence that Pierce's developments actually harm long-term tax revenue by driving out established businesses? I asked, sharing my research from other towns Pierce had revitalized. Meanwhile, I began building a case against Madison. Through Lauren's banking connections and some discreet conversations with Madison's former coworkers in Boston, I discovered a pattern of deception and manipulation that stretched back years. She was fired from Boston Financial for accessing confidential client information, Lauren revealed. And that marketing director position she claims to have held? She was an administrative assistant who got promoted to junior account manager before the information breach. I also tracked down Tim Norwood, the ex-fiancé from Vermont, who confirmed my suspicions. Madison Pierce is a professional con artist, he said bitterly during our phone call. She targets family businesses, creates discord between family members, isolates her mark, then facilitates her father's acquisition of the property. The engagement ends once the deal closes, usually with her keeping any family heirlooms she's managed to secure. Madison must have sensed my investigation because she escalated her attacks. First came threatening text messages, "Back off and go back to Chicago, or I'll make sure your precious career is destroyed next. I have friends at Barrett Marketing." When I didn't respond, she reported to Jeffrey that I was harassing her. He confronted me outside the coffee shop where I was working. "Stay away from my wife," he shouted, causing a scene that had other patrons staring. "Haven't you done enough damage?" I maintained my composure and surreptitiously recorded the interaction on my phone. "I haven't contacted Madison at all, Jeffrey. She's the one sending me threatening messages." "More lies," he spat. "Just like that fake job in Chicago. Madison checked Barrett Marketing has no associate director named Autumn Miller." That stopped me cold. "What are you talking about? I've worked there for 5 years. Save it. Madison's friend works in HR for their parent company. They've never heard of you." After Jeffrey stormed off, I immediately called Emma, who confirmed my employment and title. "Though it's strange you'd ask," she added. "Everything okay?" The fourth betrayal came when I learned from Haley that our grandmother's diamond ring specifically promised to me had been given to Madison as a push present for when the baby comes. Our grandmother had worn that ring for 62 years of marriage, and it was meant to go to the first granddaughter to marry. Despite being married 8 months before me, Madison had initially been given a different family piece. Now, she had that too. Thomas proved invaluable, providing key documents about the store's actual financial situation. "Your father built this business on customer relationships and fair pricing," he told me. "Jeffrey has been letting inventory slide while raising prices, driving customers to the big box store on the highway. It's exactly what Pierce Development wants to devalue the business while increasing the property value." My investigation into Madison's background revealed something even more shocking. She had a history of faking pregnancies to accelerate her schemes. "The timeline never adds up," Tim Norwood explained. "She claimed to be 3 months pregnant when we got engaged. 4 months later, still claiming first trimester symptoms. When I suggested an ultrasound, she manufactured a convenient miscarriage and used it to pressure me into signing over part of the business to help with her depression." I shared this information cautiously with Haley, who had been increasingly supportive as Madison's control over the family grew more obvious. "I've noticed some inconsistencies," Haley admitted. "She claimed morning sickness was over, then used it as an excuse to miss Dad's birthday dinner. And her baby bump seems to appear and disappear depending on who's around." The breaking point came at the town's winter festival. Madison had positioned herself as event chair, using it as an opportunity to promote Pierce Development's vision for the town. I attended with Simon Blackwell, who had agreed to publicly announce his competing preservation-focused development plan. When Madison spotted us together, she made a beeline across the room, Jeffrey in tow. "How dare you show your face here?" she hissed. "And with a business competitor? Your betrayal knows no bounds." "It's a public event, Madison," I replied calmly. "And Simon is an old family friend." This was a strategic exaggeration. Simon had indeed known my father years ago, but they weren't close. "More lies," Madison said, her voice rising. "You've done nothing but try to undermine my position in this family since you arrived." Several bystanders were watching now, which had been my intention. Madison was most vulnerable when emotional, and I needed witnesses to her true nature. "I'm simply trying to protect my family's legacy," I said. "A legacy that's being systematically dismantled for profit." "You abandoned that legacy when you left for Chicago," Madison nearly shouted. "You have no right to it anymore. And you have no right to fake a pregnancy to manipulate my brother and steal family heirlooms," I replied quietly. The crowd gasped. Madison's face contorted with rage, and for a moment, her carefully constructed facade cracked completely. "You stupid bitch," she snarled, lunging toward me. Jeffrey barely caught her arm before she could strike me. "Madison, the baby?" he cautioned, looking uncomfortable as whispers spread through the watching crowd. "There is no baby," I said clearly. "There never was. Just like there wasn't one with Tim Norwood in Vermont 3 years ago." Madison's composure completely shattered. "You'll regret this," she spat, before allowing Jeffrey to lead her away. But the damage was done. The town had seen a glimpse of the real Madison Pierce. The day after the Winter Festival confrontation, I finally managed to get my father alone. He had been avoiding direct conversation with me, but I cornered him during his morning walk, a ritual his doctor had prescribed after his heart attack. "Dad, we need to talk," I said, falling into step beside him. "There's nothing to discuss." "Autumn, you've made your feelings about the family quite clear." "What feelings?" "Dad, I don't know what Jeffrey or Madison have told you, but I've never said or done anything against this family." He stopped walking, his expression pained. "I saw the emails. Autumn, the ones where you told your Chicago friends how embarrassed you were by our provincial small-town life, where you mocked the hardware store as a relic that should be put out of its misery. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach." "What emails?" "Dad, I never wrote anything like that. Never." "Jeffrey showed them to me. Printouts from your Gmail account." "Why would he make something like that up?" "Because Madison is manipulating him." "Dad, those emails are fake. Here, look at my actual account right now." I pulled out my phone and logged into my email, showing him my sent folder, searching for any such messages. Nothing. "See? They fabricated those emails." My father looked confused, doubt creeping into his expression for the first time. "But why would Jeffrey lie about something so important?" "Because Madison has convinced him I'm a threat to their plans." "Dad, I have copies of the actual correspondence I've sent about the family." I showed him emails to Rachel and other friends, where I'd expressed how much I missed home, how proud I was of the family business, how I hoped to bring marketing expertise back to help modernize the store while keeping its character. "I'd never be embarrassed by you or the store," I said, my voice breaking. "That business is your legacy. It's our family's heart." Something shifted in my father's eyes, a crack in the wall Madison had built around him. "The store has been struggling," he admitted quietly. "Jeffrey doesn't have the knack for it that you and I do. Never did, really." "I know, Dad. And Madison's father is counting on that failure. His development plans depend on acquiring our property. The loans they've given you are designed to fail." We walked in silence for several minutes while my father processed this information. Finally, he asked, "What do you suggest we do?" That simple question, acknowledging my input had value, felt like the first real victory. Meanwhile, Madison's scheme continued unraveling. Haley discovered discrepancies in Madison's pregnancy timeline, pointing out to our mother that Madison had claimed to be 12 weeks along in early December, but was still saying she was in her first trimester in late January. "And have you noticed she never has doctor appointments?" Haley asked when she called to update me. She always says she just had one last week or has one scheduled for when no one can accompany her. Madison, sensing her control slipping, made increasingly desperate moves. She convinced Jeffrey to cut ties with Thomas, firing him from the store after 25 years of service. He was helping Autumn gather information against us, Madison claimed, according to Haley. We can't trust him anymore. The loss of this loyal ally hit my father hard. Thomas had been with the store since before Jeffrey was born, and his departure accelerated my father's disillusionment with Madison's influence. The situation came to a head at what Madison had billed as a family business strategy dinner. All the Millers were present, along with Harold and Catherine Pierce. I had not been invited, but attended at my father's quiet insistence, a small but significant show of his renewed independence. Madison looked furious at my presence, but maintained her saccharine smile for her father's benefit. We're discussing private business matters tonight, Autumn. Perhaps another time would be better? Autumn stays, my father said firmly. This is a family business discussion, and last I checked, she's family. Harold Pierce cleared his throat uncomfortably. Well, that brings us to tonight's announcement. Given the challenges the hardware store has been facing, we've developed an exit strategy that benefits everyone. Jeffrey nodded along eagerly as Harold outlined a plan to relocate Miller's Hardware to a smaller space in the upcoming Riverside Plaza, selling the current building and land to Pierce Development. The terms would forgive the outstanding loans, but provide no additional compensation for the property, which had been in our family for generations. The current location is outdated, Madison added smoothly. The new space will be modern, efficient, and much easier for Dad to manage with his health concerns. My father looked shell-shocked. You want to move the store from where my father built it? Where I've worked my entire life? It's the sensible option, Robert, Harold said patronizingly. The market has changed. Small, independent hardware stores can't compete with big box retailers anymore. That's not true, I interjected. Independent hardware stores are thriving in many communities by focusing on expertise and service that big boxes can't match. Our store was profitable until recently, with all due respect, Madison said with thinly veiled contempt. You haven't been involved in the business for years. You don't understand the local market anymore. Actually, I've been consulting with several local businesses over the past few weeks. I've seen the market firsthand, and I've also reviewed our store's financial records. The decline coincided precisely with the changes implemented after your father's loan. Harold's face darkened. Jeffrey, I thought you said your sister wouldn't be involved in these discussions. Before Jeffrey could respond, my mother surprisingly spoke up. I want to hear what Autumn has to say. She has an MBA and works with major companies. Her perspective matters. Madison shot my mother a look of pure venom before quickly composing herself. Of course, Martha, but let's remember who's been here supporting the family day in and day out. I presented the alternative plan I'd developed with Simon Blackwell, a modernization of the current store that would preserve its historical significance while updating inventory systems and adding an e-commerce component. The plan included refinancing options through Westfield Community Bank that would eliminate the predatory Pierce Development loans. This is ridiculous, Madison snapped when I finished. You can't just waltz back into town and take over. Jeffrey and I have been working on our plan for months. Tell her, Jeffrey. My brother looked uncomfortable, caught between his wife and mounting evidence that her plans didn't align with the family's best interests. The conversation devolved into heated arguments. Madison became increasingly agitated as her careful manipulations began to unravel. When my father openly questioned whether moving the store was in the family's best interest, she lost control. The store is practically worthless anyway. The only value is in the property, which my father is generously offering to take off your hands. The room went silent. Even Harold looked aghast at his daughter's tactless outburst. What I think Madison means, Jeffrey attempted, is that the business model needs updating. That's not what she meant, my father said quietly, and I think we all know it now. Madison stormed out, Jeffrey following after casting a confused, almost pleading look in my direction. As the tension gradually dissipated, my mother revealed another betrayal that sent fresh shockwaves through the room. I found Madison in your office last week, Robert, she admitted. She was going through the insurance documents. I didn't think much of it until I checked the file yesterday and noticed the policy disbursement check was missing. An investigation the next day revealed that Madison had diverted a $12,000 insurance payment intended for store repairs into a separate account. This fifth betrayal was the final straw for my father. As we left the disastrous dinner, my father clutched his chest suddenly, his face contorting in pain. "Dad!" I cried, catching him as he stumbled. "Call an ambulance," my mother shouted to Haley, who was already dialing her phone. As we waited for the paramedics, my father gripped my hand. "I'm sorry, Autumn," he whispered. "I should have trusted you from the beginning." In the chaos of the moment, those words meant everything. While my father recovered in the hospital from what was diagnosed as a severe angina attack, a warning sign rather than a full heart attack, I launched the final phase of my plan. Using my marketing expertise, I created a campaign for Miller's Hardware centered around its history and community significance. 4 generations of service became our rallying cry, with before and after photos showing the store's evolution since 1947. The campaign went viral locally, with longtime customers sharing memories and expressing support. Community engagement skyrocketed as people realized the historic business might be transformed into yet another generic shopping center. My professional connections came through with feature articles in regional business publications, highlighting the store as a case study in small-town business preservation. The coverage caught the attention of a statewide historical preservation society, which began exploring landmark designation for the building. Madison's father, recognizing the shifting public sentiment, arranged to meet me at a neutral location, a restaurant halfway between Westfield and his office in Hartford. "You've created quite the problem for me, Miss Miller," Harold said without preamble after we'd ordered coffee. "I've simply protected my family's legacy," I replied calmly. "Something I would have expected my brother to do." Harold studied me with newfound respect. "Madison underestimated you. She said you were so career-focused that you'd return to Chicago rather than fight for a struggling small-town business. Madison has underestimated my entire family. We Millers don't abandon our own." "Speaking of Madison," Harold said, leaning forward, "I should inform you that this isn't her first performance. There have been other situations where her enthusiasm for securing property deals has led to certain embellishment." "You mean like faking pregnancies? Creating family discord? Stealing heirlooms?" Harold had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I've never condoned those specific tactics. My interest has always been purely business, yet you've benefited from them repeatedly. I've documented 3 previous instances where Madison inserted herself into families with valuable properties, created divisions, and facilitated your acquisitions. I'm prepared to share that documentation with the appropriate authorities if necessary." The implied threat hung between us. Harold eventually nodded. "What do you want?" "I want the loans forgiven, as they were predatory to begin with. I want Madison to return all family items she's acquired. And I want a signed statement that Pierce Development has no current or future interest in the Miller's Hardware property or any adjacent properties." That's a steep price for discretion. It's a bargain compared to what fraud charges would cost you both financially and reputationally. After further negotiation, Harold agreed to my terms, adding only that I should handle the Madison situation with discretion. It was clear he was more concerned about his business reputation than his daughter's well-being. Armed with an audio recording of Madison admitting to faking her pregnancy captured by Haley during a heated argument when Madison thought they were alone, I prepared for the final confrontation. Jeffrey had been avoiding me since our father's hospitalization, torn between loyalty to his wife and mounting evidence of her deception. When I asked to meet him at the store after closing, I was surprised that he agreed. "I've been doing some investigation," he said when I arrived, his expression haunted. "The things you said about Madison, I didn't want to believe them, but now you do?" He nodded miserably. "I found birth control pills in her drawer, and when I mentioned scheduling the 20-week ultrasound appointment together, she completely changed the subject. There were other signs I ignored because I wanted so badly for it to be real." My anger toward Jeffrey softened. For all his faults, he had been as much Madison's victim as anyone else, perhaps more so because of his emotional investment. "I'm sorry, Jeffrey. I know how much you wanted to be a father. What do we do now?" he asked, looking younger and more vulnerable than I'd seen him in years. "We stand together as a family," I replied. starting now. The final confrontation occurred at the store the next day. Madison arrived expecting to meet with Jeffrey alone to discuss the next steps following my father's health crisis. Instead, she found our entire family waiting my parents, Jeffrey, Haley, and me. "What's this? An intervention?" she asked with nervous laughter. "I'm not the one who needs help here. We know everything, Madison," Jeffrey said quietly. "About the fake pregnancy, the diverted insurance money, your history in Vermont and before. All of it." Madison's face hardened, the mask of sweetness dropping completely. "You don't know anything, and you can't prove any of it." "Actually, we can," I said, playing the audio recording Haley had captured. As Madison's own voice filled the room, "Of course I'm not pregnant, you idiot. But they don't need to know that until after we secure the property." The color drained from her face. "You recorded me? That's illegal." "Connecticut is a one-party consent state," Haley said with uncharacteristic firmness. "I consented to recording our conversation." Madison's strategy shifted instantly. "Jeffrey, baby, it's not what it sounds like. I was just upset that day. You know how much I want to start our family." "Stop it, Madison," Jeffrey interrupted. "Just stop. It's over. I want you out of our house today. You can't be serious. Everything I've done has been for us. For our future." "You mean for your father's development plans?" I corrected. "Plans that have now fallen through, by the way. I met with Harold yesterday. He's cutting his losses on this project." This final revelation seemed to break something in Madison. "He promised me," she screeched. "After everything I've done, everything I've put up with in this backward town with your pathetic little store and your precious family traditions." Her true nature fully exposed, Madison launched into threats. "You'll regret this. I know things about all of you. Secrets. I'll make sure everyone in town knows exactly what kind of family the oh-so-respectable Millers really are." "I think the town has already seen who you really are," my mother said calmly. "And we're not afraid of the truth anymore." As Madison stormed out, Jeffrey followed to ensure she actually left the house and didn't destroy anything in the process. The rest of us remained at the store, the weight of months of tension finally lifting. "I should have listened to you from the beginning," my father said, squeezing my hand. "You saw what the rest of us couldn't or wouldn't." "We all wanted to believe she made Jeffrey happy," my mother added. "We ignored the warning signs because it was easier than facing the truth." Later that day, we learned that Madison had fled town, but not before taking some small family items, including, ironically, the diamond ring that had been promised to me. Though the financial loss was minimal compared to what could have happened, the symbolic violation still stung. A week later, Madison's parents served her with their own restraining order after she attempted to access company accounts without authorization. Her father's final message to Jeffrey expressed regret for the situation, but no real remorse for his role in it. Business was business, after all. In the months that followed Madison's dramatic departure, our family focused on my father's recovery. His health improved steadily once the stress of Madison's manipulation was removed, though his cardiologist emphasized the need for ongoing care and reduced workload. The process of family reconciliation began slowly, with awkward conversations and painful acknowledgments of how we had drifted apart. Jeffrey struggled the most, grappling with both embarrassment at being so thoroughly deceived and genuine grief for the future he had imagined. "I really thought I'd be a father soon," he confessed during a quiet moment at the store. "Even though it was all built on lies, the loss feels real. The desire is real," I told him. "And you'll have that chance someday, with someone worthy of you and our family." Using my marketing background and business connections, I developed a comprehensive revitalization plan for Miller's Hardware. We secured legitimate financing through Westfield Community Bank, with Lauren's assistance, to modernize inventory systems while preserving the store's historic character. Simon Blackwell's development company invested in renovating the building's facade as part of a larger downtown preservation initiative. I negotiated a flexible arrangement with Emma that allowed me to split my time between Chicago and Westfield, 2 weeks remote, 2 weeks in the office, giving me the opportunity to implement the store's transformation while maintaining my career. "You're lucky Barrett values you so highly," Emma remarked during a video call. Not many associate directors could swing this arrangement. I'm lucky to have both worlds, I replied, recognizing the truth in those words for the first time. The restraining order against Madison became necessary after a final threatening incident. She returned to town briefly, attempting to spread rumors about our family through social media and confronting Jeffrey outside the store. The local police chief, a longtime family friend, ensured the legal protections were enforced, and Madison eventually moved across the country, presumably to start fresh with new targets. The family business flourished under our shared leadership. Jeffrey focused on customer relationships, where his personable nature shined, while I handled marketing and business strategy. My father served as advisor, his decades of experience invaluable but no longer bearing the full weight of daily operations. Even Haley found a role, managing the store's new e-commerce platform that extended our reach beyond the local community. We reinstated family traditions that had fallen by the wayside, including Sunday dinners and the annual fishing trip to Lake Henderson. The first time my father and I returned to our old fishing spot, I brought along the wooden lure I'd rescued from the garage. "You kept it," he said, visibly moved. Of course I did. Some things are too precious to let go. As we cast our lines into the still water, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for months. The relationship wasn't fully healed. Perhaps it never would be exactly as it was before, but something new and stronger was emerging from the broken pieces. 1 year after the New Year's party that had started it all, we gathered again in the family home. The atmosphere couldn't have been more different. Genuine warmth replacing tension, honest conversation replacing manipulation. "I'd like to make a toast," my father said, raising his glass. "To family, real family who stand by each other even when it's difficult." Especially when it's difficult, we clinked glasses, the simple gesture affirming what we had nearly lost and fought so hard to reclaim. The family photos were back in their rightful places, including a new addition, a picture of all 4 Millers in front of the renovated store, the 4 Generations banner proudly displayed above them. A few days later, I spotted Madison in town during a shopping trip with my mother. She was with an older man, her hand on his arm in that proprietary way I recognized all too well. Their matching wedding bands suggested she had found a new target quickly. Instead of anger, I felt an unexpected wave of sympathy. What kind of emptiness drove someone to build their life around deception and manipulation? What void was she trying to fill with stolen heirlooms and fabricated pregnancies? As Madison noticed me and hurriedly steered her companion away, I realized the most important lesson of the past year. True family isn't defined by blood or legal ties alone, but by people who choose to love you even through the worst storms and who forgive you when you've weathered them imperfectly. That evening, as I packed for my return to Chicago, my father knocked on my bedroom door. "Got a minute?" he asked, sitting on the edge of my bed just as he had when I was a child. "For you?" "Always." He handed me a small velvet box. Inside was my grandmother's diamond ring, not the original that Madison had taken, but a remarkably similar replica. "Your mother and I had it made," he explained. "It's not the same, I know, but the meaning behind it is." I slipped it on my finger, tears blurring my vision. "It's perfect. Just like the original, it's meant to be passed down to the next generation," he said. A reminder that some bonds can't be broken, no matter how hard someone tries. As we embraced, I knew that home wasn't the physical house I'd grown up in or even the store that bore our name. Home was the people who had fought to find their way back to each other. Home was the choice we made every day to remain connected, despite distance and differences. Home was knowing you belonged, even when the journey took you elsewhere for a time. Have you ever had to stand up for your family against someone who was trying to tear it apart? Or have you experienced that moment when you realized someone close to you wasn't who they pretended to be? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. And share with someone who might need a reminder that true family sticks together through thick and thin. Thank you for listening to my story today, and I hope it gives you strength if you're facing your own family challenges. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones most worth fighting.